So I thought this was supposed to be like a natural, like organic thing.
It is, but something. Okay, it is, but these things. Can you understand where I'm coming from? This is production value stuff. That what's on the camera is. Hello, everyone.
Hey.
Welcome to today's episode of Monday Morning Marriage Podcast.
Yes.
My name is Kevin,
And I'm Sarah.
and we are the Johnsons.
The Johnsons.
All righty. We're glad that you're back with us today. So today the topic is what is marriage? That's the overall topic. I think that I personally need a biblical outlook because I struggle immensely with dealing with the nuance of marriage.
Marriage is not easy.
Mostly because of sin.
Definitely because of sin.
Also because of a lack of knowledge of the Lord and his ways. Where we find ourselves in sin most of the time signifies a lack of forefront knowledge of what God has done for us
Right.
and what he's decreed. So
I think also, for you, your parents were divorced and my parents were never married. So,
well, yeah, it's tough when you have one view of marriage and then you realize that the perfection you thought existed wasn't so. And I think primarily from my parents being divorced, it showed me the importance of having a biblical foundation for marriage. We're going to inherently seek to set things up how we want them, and though they might look good from the outside, or we might try to put on a face that things are good when we do something like go out into the world or record a show, there's still sin that is constantly unscrewing the hinges of whatever we try to set up for ourselves. But sin can't conquer the Lord and his way. So at least that's where I'm coming from when I say, okay, let's look at a biblical sense of what it means to be married and see where we kind of fit in, how we feel about life in general, and then kind of try to direct ourselves in the right way by using the word.
okay.
So what does it mean to be married? That's where we're going to start. What does it mean to be married? We'll look at what the world says. We'll talk about what our concepts of marriage were before being Christian, and what does the Bible say? What should we strive for in marriage? So I'll let you. I talked enough already to start. So what would you say that it means to be married?
Okay. So I guess for me, in the beginning, when getting married, it was more about like, I wanted a family, and I knew I didn't want to have children without being married first. Even though I wasn't a Christian at the time, I knew I wanted to be married because my mom raised me basically by herself as a single mom. And although I knew my dad and I had a relationship with my dad, my mom and my dad didn't really have that close of a relationship, and I knew I didn't want that for my children. Like, I didn't want to just be like a baby mama or like anything like that. Like, not that my mom was that. Like, my parents were together, you know. They had like a ceremonial marriage, but they weren't like legally married, so it was very easy for him to like pick up and move on when that time came. But so I knew I wanted that, and at the time also, like, not many of my siblings were married, and I hadn't really seen an example of a happy marriage, but I knew I wanted that for my kids. I think the world definitely now pushes this idea that, oh, you like I hear some women say, "Oh, I want to have kids, but I don't need to be married." And I'm like, they don't understand. It's like people don't understand the value of marriage. Like, it's not that you hear people say, "Oh, it's just a piece of paper." It's like, no, it's more than that. And I think for me, I always knew it was more than that. It was more than just a piece of paper. It was about building something. And so for me, it was always about building something. I think the feminist view is that we don't need men, when in reality, they're half of our species. So that makes no sense, And so, I think marriage is about building. I think the scripture speaks to that as well.
Okay, so for me, what I thought marriage was before having a biblical outlook was two people being together, raising a family, striving for their individual dreams, and somehow achieving perfection by way of busyness.
So like a business?
I mean, I guess that's how it sounds.
Some people like, even now, I feel like some people do get married for
I'm just saying
business kind of reasons.
Well, I just mean in terms of my perception. Like, looking at my parents, I thought, okay, they have a perfect marriage because I don't witness them fighting often. We have a nice house. We go to church. Mom teacher, dad professor. They make music together. We were financially decent. So I thought, okay, well, a marriage is this functions as this relationship which does not involve discord and produces financial stability and looks really nice and always puts on a good face. But when my parents got divorced, the facade crumbled because it goes, oh, wait, there is discord. And if there is now, there probably always has been some version or some level of discord, some level of disagreement, some aspect of disharmony underlying. So then I thought, well, if something so perfect can end so horribly, well, then the whole thing must be a sham, But
marriage or their marriage?
Marriage. Because to me, my parents were the highest view of marriage that that was what I thought marriage was. Okay, it's perfect. It's great. Christmas time, we give gifts to each other, we buy each other presents, and we're always smiling, and we never seem to argue. Like, that's what a marriage is. But now I know, like, there was other things underlying that maybe weren't being attended to as they should have been.
Yeah.
Because marriage, though it is intended to be, it's intended to work well when done right, it isn't void of those things. So, because if you're going to have challenges, then you prepare yourself to face those challenges. And so going into what a biblical marriage is, and before giving a definition, I think what I'm realizing now is, well, in order to have a good marriage, it's less about the outward impressions and more about the internal, like, outwardly it might look cohesive, but really it needs to be internally cohesive, even if outwardly there seem to be imperfections. So, for instance, I'd rather our kids think that marriage is a place where people struggle together to do what is right in a committed and loving environment where we fight through struggles together and we walk through life together amidst struggle, as opposed to them thinking everything is perfect all the time and there is no issues. Because then if there ever were issues, so in my case, when I saw issues, it was like, oh wow, something is off. But issues are so much more of a regular thing in the world and in marriages and relationships in general. that now I know marriage is less about looking perfect and more about striving to do right, regardless of how it looks. So you kind of see where I'm going with that.
Yeah, it seems like to me, it sounds like you want for our marriage to be more transparent for the kids.
Well, so for instance, let's just say for us, and I don't want to put my parents on blast, so I'm not going to try to determine what was going on behind closed doors that I didn't know about. But like for us, as we deal with issues, I think it's imperative that we face them head on and say, what are these issues? What is the cause of them, and why are we experiencing them? And then strive to dig at the root of that. So that's always been my personality or my angle, to try to dig at the root of a problem, try to get it at its core, as opposed to trying to brush over things. Like, how many people in marriage brush over their issues thinking they'll just go away, or thinking, well, when we go to the movies next Friday, we'll forget all about it. You know what I mean? I don't see how that is useful. I think it's more useful to deal with the struggle of, okay, we're not communicating well. We're not being honest enough, to really meld well together. So in terms of what our kids will see, our kids may very well see more conversations that are not 100% peachy keen, because we're trying to work through some things. But they'll also see resolutions.
Well, you hope so.
Well, as far as we're actively striving to work out our issues, there will be resolutions. So at least that's what I assume. I think it would be useful to look in the Bible and see, what did God intend for marriage to be, for us to get a good gauge on that. But before we do that, you got any general comments?
I think it's hard to be. I think it's interesting because it's like, okay, in part, like from the children's perspective, in part you don't want your kids to think, okay, everything's perfect, everything's peachy keen, as you said. You want it to be more real for them, but at the same time, I feel like if you have parents that are always arguing, always fighting, mom's always crying, dad's always yelling, that kind of thing, that can also, I feel like, make kids then grow up and be like, I never want to get married. Like, my parents hated each other and they just stuck it out because they felt like they had to, because I've seen that. I've talked to people that were that way. They were like, I'm never getting married. Like it, or they're like, my parents had a miserable marriage and they just stuck it out for each other. Like if I feel like sometimes people have very different personalities, and I think marriage asks that it's almost imperative that you have to give. Like, it's like someone has to give for the other to. I was listening to like a Jordan Peterson conversation with his two kids, and he's talking to one of his sons, and he was talking about how you never really meet in the middle. It's always someone either deciding, okay, I'm gonna drop this, or I'm gonna give in, or I'm gonna, it's never a meet in the middle. It's like someone's always compromising more for the other person to, you either have to let some of it go, or maybe once some of the emotion dies, you realize, oh, it's not that serious, and then you can compromise or whatever. I think marriage definitely is that. It's not a meet in the middle. And I think, it is a compromise, and I think hopefully both people are willing to compromise and not always feel like their needs need to be met over the others.
Well, I agree. I want to address one of the things you said. You mentioned an opposite extreme. So, for instance, I mentioned one side of an extreme where people put on this front to themselves and to their children that nothing is wrong when obviously we're sinners, so things are going to go wrong.
Right.
But you mentioned the opposite extreme of people always fighting and yelling and crying. But that's not, at least in my perspective, that's not what it looks like to constantly work out your issues, to constantly face your problems. It doesn't have to be that. But maybe there's a little bit of your personality there that is not as eager to press on those issues, to where pressing on issues might seem like that to you, maybe.
You know, it's interesting because when you say that, like it reminds me in my head, because I think in images. So when you say constantly working on your issues, you know, really getting at the root of it, in my head, what I see is like if you are a gardener and instead of, you know, kind of pruning a tree to make it something beautiful, to me, it sounds like you're saying you're going to dig at the root of it and root it out and put it and try and grow a new tree.
Well, no, it depends on the issue. Like, for instance, just to use the plant analogy, it depends on the issue that you're having with that tree. If it's a leaf issue, you prune leaves. If it's a branch issue, you prune branches. If there's a root issue, if there's like rot in the roots, you have to dig to the root.
Mm-hmm.
And cut out the rot.
Okay.
And God willing, don't kill the tree.
Right.
And there's incredible nuance, incredible tenderness that it takes to do that.
Right.
So, for instance, and I'll just use Jesus as an example because there's so many emphasis in the Bible to Jesus pruning his people or cutting people off at the root that don't belong in the tree. Jesus is incredibly compassionate, incredibly delicate, hard when he needs to be, soft when he needs to be. Just depending on the circumstance. So I think it's important to give some story time context. Our past was full of there's so much history of arguing and tears and fighting. Mm-hmm. And before coming to Christ, my view of digging at the root was so unhealthy that it was like taking a chainsaw to the root of the tree
every time
because one leaf was wilting.
Right.
It's so unhealthy, so unproductive, and more damage. I mean, clearly, it's amazing our tree is not dead, but that's by the grace of God. That's what I say, at least. If it were up to me, I would have been ruined this relationship. But that's not what I'm referring to now. So that was my response, because 17 parents get divorced, 20 I meet you, 21 we're dating, partying, not really focusing on anything good. Then depression seeps in. So now we're depressed, trying to figure out life, not really trying to figure out life, just living life together. And when we started having issues, my instantaneous response was, I'm not going to do what my parents did. I'm not going to let whatever problems are stay underlying and destroy this thing. So I'm going to dig at the root and root it out, but in an unhealthy way. So I'm chopping. And it's like, hold on, man. Like, a leaf just fell off, because that's what time of year it is. You don't need to chop the whole thing down. So maybe particularly some of your, just that natural response to what I said is coming from that.
I could see that.
Because I respond.
It's a trauma response.
Yeah. Because I responded with that extreme back then. Mm-hmm. But in Christ, he's been gracious to change my heart to where I still want to get at the root of things. But I understand that there's a much more nuanced and delicate way of doing it, and actually going after what is rotten and not being so reckless as to potentially lose everything just to get at that rot. Because we still have leftover traumas and things that we got to get over, we got to work
Mhm.
through. But also, we're perpetually sinners.
Yeah. Right.
So eventually, I think it will just be a matter of pruning sin out of our marriage. And if you've been married a long time, tell us if this is correct. But it seems like people who have dealt with the root issues and are now just living in harmony together will find themselves pruning constantly,
Mm-hmm.
but not always having to see what's going on with the root because the root is.
Yeah, and you know,
healthy.
it's interesting. Like, I hear what you're saying. I think that's true. I think it's hard though, and I think it's a lot of work, and you have to be willing to put that work in, you know, or the plant won't grow.
Mm-hmm.
But also, when we talk about like how difficult it was for us in the beginning of our marriage, or not just our marriage, of our relationship, and then our, you know, beginning parts of our marriage, you know, some might say like, okay, well, why did you guys even stay together if it was that bad?
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I think hindsight, because at the time, you know, I had feelings about leaving or whatever, especially before having kids. You know, once you have kids, it's like, wait a minute, you know, I'm being dramatic here. Like, I'm not going to ruin my entire family because I'm in a mood, you know. Let me sleep on it a little bit. Maybe I just need to go to sleep, take a shower, you know, do my hair. I don't know. Get my nails done. But, but, I think that, you have to decide from the beginning. It's like, okay, when I wake up in the morning, right? I'm really good at waking up at time early in the morning, even if I've had a rough night of sleep. If I determine the night before that I'm going to get up early, and I have my reasons why I'm getting up early, then I have no problem getting up in the morning. But if I go to sleep kind of just, I'm going to sleep and I'm not thinking about the next day at all, about waking up early or anything, then I'll just snooze the alarm. Because I'm like, why am I getting up? I had no plans to like get up early. What am I going to do? You know? And although there's plenty to do, you know, if I get up early in the morning, there's plenty I could do. But in my mind, before I went to bed, you know, I'm not thinking in that split second when I'm going to snooze the alarm, because I didn't plan to get up early the next day. But I think in marriage, when going into it, when going into that marriage, you have to decide, okay, I'm going to stick this out. Like, I'm not going to get divorced. Divorce isn't an option. I'm going to stick this out, you know, not day of when they ask you the question, you know, through sickness and health. You're like, oh, yeah, okay, well, that sounds nice. It's like, no. It's like before that, when you decide, okay, I want to be married one day. Okay. But, you know, they like to throw out statistics about how marriages fail. It's like, okay, are you going to be a statistic, or are you going to stick it out? Are you going to try and you know, are you in this for the long haul, for real? Like, no matter how bad it gets, are you going to stick this out? And I think if you decide and you determine, okay, this is it, I'm going to be married, I'm going to stay married, and we're going to figure this out, then I think you have a better chance of really staying together. You know, especially if you're even, because you get to those points where you don't want to work on it, you know, and you're thinking, oh, well, maybe it's just easier if it ends. But it's like, you have to remind yourself, okay, I said I would stick this out. I said I would do this. I said, we're building something. This is important, you know, that kind of thing. I think it's constantly reminding yourself of that. But then it gets to a point where that's not even a reminder. You don't have to remind yourself of that anymore. You know, it's just kind of like, okay, like, this is, I mean, I don't know what a person does for in when it comes to infidelity. You know, I feel like that's definitely harder to stick it out because of the betrayal part. But
just so what I'm taking you to mean is not okay. So there's a different conversation for those.
Yeah.
Not different, but there's a more nuanced conversation for those heavier things.
We're talking more about. We're talking, if we're talking about personality issues,
right?
That's different. You know, that's more like, okay, I'm gonna stick this out. We're gonna figure it out. You know, we're gonna prune. You know,
I think
find the rot. But
I think there is something to say also. And just because I jumped in, now let me clarify. I think that things like infidelity, things like abuse, I'm not going to be quick to say, okay, that's a reason to just automatically leave. I think that's just a more systematic thing to, not systematic, that's a more, what word am I looking for? But a much more tentative thing to try to get at.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not just a blanket, hey, get over yourself.
Right, like infidelity and abuse, that's a tough one.
Like to some people will say, well, that's just, now you just go.
Yeah.
Just end it. But I don't think it's that. I think it's much more sensitive of a topic.
Honestly, I don't feel like I can speak on either one of those topics, really. I mean, we don't have any infidelity issues.
Right.
I mean, by the grace of God, I don't. I mean,
and people that do, I think, okay, so if we're using the tree analogy, so sometimes root issues are affected by the soil that the tree is in.
Right.
And the soil might be affected by the environment that the soil is in.
Right.
And so on and so forth. And so the deeper your issues are, the more broad the spectrum is that you have to focus on, and the more difficult I would imagine that it is to actually tend to that thing. Because like we might have root issues, but if you have a soil problem, you need to deal with the soil, and then you got to deal with the root, and then you got to deal with the byproduct that it has on the effect it has on the leaves and the branches. If it's a weather problem, you got to deal with the weather, then deal with the soil, then deal with the root. So sometimes the tree dies, and so on and so forth. So, and not to take the analogy too far to get ambiguous, but I want to address when you said, well, why are we together amidst the challenges that we've said we faced? But then you mentioned intentionality and how that helps significantly or gives you a higher probability of staying together.
Well, I think so, at least.
I think that's true, and I think whether we know it or not, we both had a level of intentionality, I think, where we wanted to stick it out.
Yeah.
Maybe not the same exact intentionality. Like, it's not like we were like, okay, let's be unified in this, which if you're getting married, be unified in your intention at the onset. But like I know, like we talked about in the last episode, you said, if we're going to do this thing, we're going to do it. If you even want to ask me to be your girlfriend, we're going to need to get married.
Yeah.
And you having those convictions to not be a single mom and so on and so forth. And so those, I think, I would imagine were your core intentions that you brought into the relationship.
Yeah.
For me, I did not want to be divorced. I was like, no, I don't want that. I want to be with the one I love until I die. And so when it's weird because when we would go through those spells, and I'd be primarily the one tripping, and then you'd start tripping, and then we'd be tripping on each other, and for some reason I'd be like, no, you can't leave me. We can't be done.
Yeah.
We can figure it out, even though we're both right now so far removed from where we need to be. We can't figure it out. That was my standpoint. We can't, even though I don't know how, we can figure it out.
Yeah. And
I think with both of us having our own, like neither one of us had a nonchalant or we could really just get divorced and it'd be fine mentality.
Yeah.
And so I think it played into why we kind of made it through some of those things.
Yeah. Because I think we definitely had, especially in the dating part of it, we definitely had a lot of breakups, but that we never really broke up. You know, it was like it's over, like I'm done. It was a lot of me kind of just being done because I was just I didn't like. I almost dreaded having conversations with you because you would just spiral and we could never get at like what you were spiraling about. And so it was just, I just be like, I'm done. Like, I don't even, this is crazy. Like, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
And then I would get there and I would, be tripping about being done, and then it would like snap you out of whatever loop you were in. Yeah. And it was almost it almost became a tactic to end the loop. It almost at a certain point of us dating, it became a tactic of, okay, like if I tell him I'm leaving, like this is ridiculous, maybe it'll snap him out of this. Even though it wasn't conscious, but looking at it now, because it was like you would start tripping, going in this cycle.
Right.
And I would deal with it for a little bit, then I would be like, I'm done.
Like,
and then
no,
you would snap out of the cycle.
we can do it because
and it would keep happening that way. And I remember, I don't know what changed. I think it got to a point where we were married, and it was no easy just walk away.
Right.
And so that stopped I'm just gonna go. But then it was the maybe we should just separate. Maybe we just shouldn't be together. But it was never I'm actually going to do this. It was more of a I'm thinking about doing this because I can't handle any of it.
And just to be clear, I wasn't tripping consistently this whole time.
No.
But there was a period of a few years where I was utterly depressed.
Yeah.
And I did take that out on you. And that developed this back and forth.
Why do you think you were so depressed though? Like,
well,
looking at it now.
Life shattering. I mean, my parents' divorce was life shattering for me. It was worldview.
But I didn't meet you when I was 7.
No,
when you were 17.
It was worldview shattering. I only met you a few years after that, but I had been smoking weed, drinking, and striving to be something else. So when I met you, I was Mr. Rockstar. Before I met you, I was church boy. So those years before I met you was the transition period. So not really dealing with reality. So by the time I met you, fell in love with you, and then real life sets in because.
So would you say the you I met wasn't really you then?
No, it was me. It was just who I had become.
Because of trying to escape other feelings.
Right. It's like, well, everything I know is a sham.
So now let's create a new reality.
Right. All these things things that, I need I want an edge to me that is, that will help me deal with my sadness. And so cool guy, rock star was my edge, long hair and,
building walls so that you could be untouchable.
Right, but for me, I'm an emotional guy.
Exactly.
I'm a sensitive guy, so my facade shatters easily.
But I think part of our personalities is that we both kind of shatter each other's facades.
We do shatter each other's facades.
I think we couldn't really pretend with each other.
Right. So by the time we ended up getting married, I was not depressed anymore, but there were still residual shock waves of that depressed time. So there were a few years after, there was like a few years right before getting married, like maybe a year or so before, like a little bit before getting married to a little bit after getting married, those few years where I wasn't as depressed and I was just trying to make up for all those other years. But you can't just go from being 0 to 100. So I still have residual effects, residual issues. And that's where a lot of some of the things that we still are working through, that's where those things really, like they were already solidified relational nuances from that time of depression and fighting. They were already set in by then. And then it was like I remember being like, well, I'm going to have to be perfect for as many years as I was ridiculous for you to,
I remember you saying
get over, all these things. And, but I was like, I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
But let's tie it over to the biblical thing about marriage, because our marriage didn't begin to really shift in a wholly positive direction until we came to faith.
True.
And even after we came to faith, there were still hiccups, but
personality struggles.
Right. And also, because it's like, how do you shift from being utterly ridiculous
Right.
to now doing what God has said, and you barely know God. But I think, okay, so what does God intend for man and woman? Well, we have where God made Adam.
Mm-hmm.
He made Adam with a purpose, but he said it's not good for man to be alone.
Mm-hmm.
Man is good, but it's not good for man to be alone. So he created Eve and said that union was good.
Mm-hmm.
Blessed it and said, be fruitful and multiply. Have dominion.
But even before that, when God makes Adam out of the dust, breathes a breath of life into him, puts him into Eden, into the garden, makes sure he has all the food he needs from the trees and everything like that. And then he says, okay, well, it's not good for man to be alone. Then he brings him all the animals.
Right.
Has him name all the animals. He named all the animals, but in all the animals that he named and everything, none of them were fit for him.
Mm-hmm.
And then he puts him to sleep, creates Eve, and then Adam's like, finally, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. She's fit for me, kind of thing, And so, I just wanted to clarify that, because it's like, man's not, because people get dogs and cats.
Right.
And they say, I'm not alone. I have my dog.
Right. Which is fine in and
man's
of
best
itself.
friend, which is fine.
But it does not answer.
It doesn't replace
God's.
Right. It doesn't. Right. It doesn't. It's not those. The beasts are not fit for you.
Right. Not in that sense.
No.
Yeah. Right. And so in that marriage sense, God made a man and a woman uniquely fit for one another. For what purpose? Right. So we have the blessing to be fruitful and multiply.
Mm-hmm.
We have Adam's and Eve's, because God said to Adam and Eve, go have dominion over this creation.
Right.
Over all the birds and the trees and the animals. So go and have dominion. It wasn't just him telling Adam have dominion. He said he told both of them to have dominion. Subsequently, their children would also get in on that. And so there's this element of marriage, which is this union, which the Bible also says that man and woman become one flesh.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this bond in this union, which takes commitment, and it takes it takes commitment to stick together. But that commitment there's a purpose that drives that commitment. So we don't just have a commitment to one another, but we have a commitment to particular things.
Right.
Like the call to have dominion and to be fruitful and multiply. Those are purposeful actions that we're supposed to be living out, and our marriage is supposed to be a vehicle by which we live that out. So in one sense, we have dominion by putting together our minds to come up with creative ways to live and cool things to do, but also to have children. Our marriage is built upon. That's why I think a lot of people, when they get married and they might have issues, but then they have kids and they go, like you said, my issues are almost on the back burner. It's not just, okay, I can get up and go.
Right.
Even people that do that, I have to imagine that they at least have to deal with that pressure of, I'm going to affect my kids big time. Now, maybe they say, well, it's not about them. Whatever they say, I don't know. Maybe they don't say it's not about them. But whatever they say, I'm sure they deal with that initial pressure.
Right.
But with all that being said, as much as we would both love to continue and to finish this off conclusively, we have to end this episode here. That's another one of the challenges of marriage, having responsibilities that you have to take care of when you would like so much to continue to fellowship.
Well, yeah. But before we end it, though, I think we should say what we like about being married. I think we kind of talked a lot about the world's view of marriage and maybe what our view of marriage coming into it and the challenges of marriage, but I don't think we clearly stated what we like about being married.
You know what? Okay.
for the sake, let's give one example each.
Okay.
One example each.
That's what I was thinking. Was
and
something.
But we cannot go into too much detail for the sake of time.
No.
So go ahead. You start.
I was hoping you would start.
Okay. Well, I like about marriage that we have each other. God said it's not good for man to be alone, nor do I want to be alone. I want to be with you. And I like that we get to. And there's a lot of, there's a lot to be said about that, but I just like spending time with you. And I like that you are mine. And I like being yours. It gives a lot of purpose to my life. It gives a lot of meaning to my strivings to have you and to work for you and to build for you. And I just like that. I like that my life has more of a meaning than just for myself, but that I was made, that God purposed me for you. And that brings me great joy. And it helps me to stay faithful even in the challenges, because I know that and you're just a beautiful woman.
Oh, that's sweet.
And so that's nice too. But also you just add unto my life so much meaning and purpose, and I'm grateful for that.
Oh, thank you for being so honest and gracious. That's sweet. What do I like about being married? I like being married to you because we're able to grow together and grow our family and be secure in knowing that someone has your back through all of it. And even in those moments of melancholy or loneliness, knowing that there's someone physically there that will just be there for you. I like that we're different and that I can learn things from you and that you can show me myself in a way that is honest to who I really am, because it's easy to put on faces with other people, but I can't put on a face with you. And I like that you are not afraid to tell me the truth about myself. I also think that you're good to look at and you're funny, and I think you're one of the bravest people I know, and you put so much on the line. You've grown so much that you're willing to put so much on the line for me and for our family. Sometimes I wish you would think less, because I think it would just help you to be less stressed. But I enjoy having fun with you. I enjoy when it's just me and you. And I think having kids, sometimes you forget that you actually, if you actually like the person you're with, that you actually like them. You know, like, I love you, but I actually like you. And for a long time, I thought I didn't like you when we had our bad times. But when we hang out, just me and you, it's always a good time. The way we vibe, it's without thought. You know, it just happens. Like, you know what I'm thinking. I know what you're thinking. You know, we move on the same frequency. And I like that. I like that you have a presence, that you're not easy to just ignore or escape. I like that about you. I didn't realize I liked that about you until later in our marriage. But I like that. I like that you want to take care of us and that you want me to be the best me I can be. I said that in our, I said that we were getting married, and at the time I didn't know what I was saying, but it was honest, and I still like that about you, that you want me to be the best that I can be, you know, and that you become gentler about it.
Yeah.
Number 4. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I appreciate that. And I would love to keep going, but I've got to get going. So this has been a great conversation. Just y'all stay out of it. I've enjoyed this conversation with you.
And I have to say, I like being married to you.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, what do you like about marriage? I mean, tax benefits, I guess. But, you know, if you're thinking about it like that, but it's like, I like being married to you.
Right.
You know, it's like, get married to the person, not the idea of marriage.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. So, with that said, thank you all for joining us. That camera's not on.
Oh, right.
Thank you for joining us. Until next time. God bless.
God bless.
See you next Monday.